Great. Awesome. Good. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on advocating for qualitative research. Today's session aims to explore the importance of qualitative research and how we can effectively communicate its value within our organizations. We'll be discussing the various strategies and sharing experiences on this topic. My name is Sarah Nikha, and I'll be facilitating today's session. I hold a PhD in HCI and have over 7 years of experience in the fields of HCI and CSCW, specifically at the intersection of healthcare and HCI. I'm currently working as an advisor user experience researcher at Eli Lilly and Company, where I have led numerous projects that qualitative research resulted in enhancing user experiences, guiding product strategy, and driving business success. Our panel today features esteemed experts in user experience research, and I'd like to start by asking them to introduce themselves. Andrew, yes.
Hi, everyone. Hello? Oh, there we go. No. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Scholl. Pleasure to see you. I've been doing qualitative research for over 20 years. The last 2+ years, I've been leading user research at the Mayo Clinic. And before that, I've done a lot of qualitative and quantitative research in different in-house teams, agencies, working really closely with a whole bunch of different stakeholders, engineers, product managers, probably people you're used to working with every day. So qualitative research is probably my favorite topic, so I'm glad to join you guys today.
I'm Carol Barnum. I do only qualitative research, and I was a professor at a university in Atlanta, where I'm from, and I opened my first usability lab there in 1994, so I've been doing research with clients for 30 years. In 2013, I transitioned from the university to opening my own company, UX Firm, and I am a consultant where I'm primarily these days focusing on medical devices going through FDA submission for clearance.
Evan Hirsch. I am the manager of the Innovation Studio for the American Heart Association. I've been there a whole 2 months. So ask me what's going on, and I have no idea. But we're actually building a new innovation studio, and my team will be a cross-discipline team there. We'll be taking intellectual property from our vast research data depths of research and seeing if we can turn them into products to create new products for healthcare and drive more research. I've worked in entertainment, product design, and games as a designer and design director and systems designer, and a lot of what I do now is messy. But I've also had a lot of design teams that we've had researchers on the design team or research departments in the team. So the last 10 years have been in healthcare.
Hey guys, I'm Christina Manicus. I am a UX designer, UX researcher. Was recently laid off in the healthcare marketing space. but I've been doing quantitative and qualitative research in service design and UX for about 8 years now, both in nonprofits and now in the digital space. And and I love advocacy and advocating and whatnot. So that's what I like doing.
Awesome. First of all, thank you so much all for your generosity with your time. And just a little bit about the session. We will have a 20 to 25 minute long discussion followed by 20 minutes questions at the end. So if you had questions, feel free to take a note and ask them at the end of the session. After that, we will close with a summary of key takeaways. And with that, I'm going to start with the first question. All right, so our first topic is the art of persuasion. Persuading stakeholders, persuading stakeholders and decision makers about the importance of qualitative research at times can be difficult. And I would like to know, how do you approach this? And if you can provide an example of a success story.
I can start really quick with that. One thing that I was doing at my job is trying to speak their language So if I was talking to developers, or I was talking to my account managers or whoever, or even directly to the client, I always tried to use their language, right? How they viewed success and whatnot in it, and kind of translating my words into their words, and that seemed to work well.
I'm going to come at this from a really different direction. I started in product design when they used to do things called focus groups, and they were often confused as user research. And if anybody's ever watched Law and Order, there's an expression on how any lawyer can indict a ham sandwich. And we used to quickly learn how to manipulate focus groups. Like when I was 24 years old, we knew how to manipulate a focus group. And so it wasn't until I got to Microsoft and games that I started working with proper user researchers. And so that craft. And so now as a design director, I have to tell you the horrible truth is I often use user research to persuade reality to people who don't want to hear it. It's interesting. I find it, I've been accused of using user research badly for good reasons, but using it because the data is usually scientific and clean, or socially scientifically clean. And that's usually in itself persuasive. And if it's not, then you've got bigger problems.
I'm a huge fan of 5 is enough, and I use that to persuade clients on projects that they should just do a small study and observe remotely or in person, and they will soon see after participant number 2 or participant number 3 that they're seeing the same problems and they actually want to start fixing them. So if somebody has a budget to test with 15, I try to persuade them to do 3 studies of 5 and iterate in between.
I would say a lot of it is, I mean, I think the root of it is a misunderstanding of what qualitative research is. I think that a lot of people just don't understand it. They think of focus groups and that's like their default, so a lot of the persuasion is just helping them understand what qualitative research is and what it's not and what it can do and what it can't do. And a lot of these folks are very metrics based. I mean, every organization I worked in is by default very quantitative. They want numbers, they want to show performance. And so what I do is a lot of my persuasive strategy is saying we can build off the quantitative insights, but really getting to the root cause, the root understanding, and the why behind it is really the power of the qualitative side.
Great. I think.
It's funny. I was also just thinking about what you were saying, and I think I'm also using qualitative research in different ways now. I think there's the way we just talked about, but I also think of qualitative research as problem deconstruction with my design teams. Deconstruction, how you take things apart. And what I've also been learning is it takes a particular user researcher or a phenotype of user researcher to be very happy to have no idea where it's going to go and to be very comfortable with that. And at the risk of being an old person, younger researchers have more trouble than older researchers do. But there's a special skill in being willing to pull at threads that you may not recognize. And then if you do it early enough in a non-persuasive way, the users tell the story to your team, to the design team, and that's super powerful. And that's very different than when I use data to beat executives over the head.
Those are all very great points. And I think one of the ways that we can basically persuade our stakeholders is, as you mentioned, basically letting them hear it from the actual end user. And one of the things that I found very useful has been using videos of participants exploring and interacting with the tool and showing the negative or positive comments that they have. I think that's can be one of the ways to persuade the stakeholders that this is a value.
We were in a class yesterday and we were talking about, and again, with proper user research next, I want to be careful, but when I was a young designer, I would get sent to department stores with very long camera lenses to take pictures of people doing things across so they didn't know you were there. And if you did it in the old days with camera film, you only got one picture every second, but boy, that was helpful.
Yeah.
Where the video is almost distractive.
Exactly.
Where you just had this freeze frame analysis was so powerful. And I think it's very out of vogue, and I still find another way of observation and really helpful. And I know it's not very in these days, but I recommend it still.
Great, awesome. Well, now let's discuss communicating impacts. We would like to know how can we effectively articulate the impact of user experience research through storytelling within our organization, either with the stakeholders or funders or within our organizations. Yes.
I have a small case study where this was a very large international hotel group, and they were rolling out a web application for their hotels to become green. So techniques and strategies that they could do to save water and save energy and so forth. And they thought that they were doing basically a summative evaluation to validate the product that they had developed for the web to be used by the clients. So we brought the hotel managers in, the hotel owners in, and the client had paid no attention to the content. So any of you out there who are content strategists may feel the pain. As a matter of fact, there was even information that was, if they even still do this these days, that was lorem ipsum, and they really hadn't even built out the content. And the content that was in there was just brochureware that had just been dumped in. So the bottom line is what happened with testing only 6 or 8 people was that they all loved the idea of strategies that they could use at their hotels, but they hated the overwhelming content and the lack of usability in the content. So the group actually scrapped the entire project and started over and redeveloped the whole thing. And we were able to then go through 3 evaluations, small evaluations, 10 months later, and they finally started to focus on the content, and they ended up with having, a product that was well received by their target audience, and they avoided the opportunity of a failed project launching.
Is that what you expected to happen?
No, well, yes, of
It
course.
wasn't
When I
expected, yeah.
when I took a look at what they were testing,
I think for me, a lot of this is actually I think qualitative research is so powerful, but it can be it generates a lot of insights that are often disconnected. It's a lot of noise trying to look for a signal. And so really, I think the real solution to qualitative research is make sure it's properly framed in context. Honestly, that's where you lose people the quickest, is if they can't tie it to something, they can't tie it to a KPI or specific ROI or outcomes. I spent the last year or so really cultivating a very mature persona and journey map program, really primarily to do that. Personas and journey maps are a way to contextualize the finding. It is about this kind of user in this kind of situation for this kind of problem. And then not only do we don't leave it at the user either, we're taking those qualitative insights and we're tying it back to the business as well. This is the impact on this user in this situation, and then this is the effect it's going to have on the business. And I can imagine your situation, there probably were a lot of impacts on business there, but I'm sure there are probably certain user types I'm sure this applied to when they're trying to do certain things. So I think a lot of the qualitative is it can often be very vague unless you really lock it down to something contextual and specific.
Great points. I think want to share a little bit, like going back to the point that Carol mentioned. I think sometimes the stakeholders come to us and think that they want summative research, although the reason why they think they want summative research is because they came up with a product without doing any generative research, just out of guessing what the user going to need. And so that's the time they come to us and be like, hey, can you just tell me if it's going to pass or not? And that's not the right question, right? So that's why we actually do, basically that's the time we educate them. And with that educating, we show our impact. So that's important. Another thing, I think, I'm not sure how many companies or organizations have something like that, but at our company, we recently started developing something called a metric UX impact tracker. And in that, what we do is we actually share the different, and it's very much user experience qualitative. Sorry? not sure, but we at Eli Lilly, we are a user experience team. We're doing this, and so what we're doing is we take a note of what is the project, who are the stakeholders, and talk about the impact. And when we talk about the impact, we talk about whether the impact was qualitative or quantitative, and whether the impact was, like, for example, product success in terms of number of clicks, things like that, or whether it was stakeholder satisfaction, a code that they shared with us that, hey, this research really is guiding product strategy or something like that. And we tracked them, and it's actually showing good enough success that other parts of organization are actually going to use that and in different product teams for their own purposes, different purposes. But I think that's also one aspect that maybe like if all the UX research work, specifically qualitative, because companies do not, a lot of newer user experience teams in the companies need to advocate for themselves, especially if it's qualitative. So I think that's also another thing that maybe possibly we could do to advocate for ourselves. Okay, do you have anything to add? Okay. Going to the next topic, some of the common objections or resistance points we encounter in advocating for qualitative research are related to budget constraints or time limitations. And would you please provide some insights into navigating these organizational challenges for qualitative research initiatives?
Yeah, I'm kind of thrown by that question, having worked at an executive at a couple large companies. I've never seen an executive argue with me in budget about qualitative or quantitative user research. Like, they'll talk about time and money, but the overall budget. And I think the problem is they don't understand what tool gets used when and why. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you're getting into that conversation, you're already missed a step of educating your client or your boss or your patron, because that's not their job to know why. That's your job. And so if you're having that conversation, you're already behind the eight ball. Exactly. Right? That being said, I often explain to them that this is your best insurance policy. That it's way better to know now before you take it out on the road. And so especially to your point where somebody may have cut some corners, not that would ever happen, but on TV, right? And they come with a product and they rush it forward. Again, never happens. But if it did, you explain this is the best way to salvage your reputation, is to find out early. Mm-hmm. And ego is a very useful tool in convincing an executive about why qualitative or quantitative is valuable.
So I was working at a creative marketing agency, and so we had a lot of different clients, and they had a certain way of doing things for a long time before I came along and said, like, hey, we should do user testing. Hey, we should do qualitative tests, because there was a lot of quantitative data that we had, right? All the bounce rates, all the submission successes and whatnot, and so I did get a lot of pushback, right, as far as like, as an agency, right? Because, that there's a timeline, and because we were dealing with healthcare, things had to go to legal before they could, get out, and it had a certain time for the dev team and stuff. So exactly. And so that was actually one of the things that I would do is I would actually, for myself, make a little proposal, right, just for the qualitative research, to be able to give to the account teams, to be able to then show the clients, right? So I would do that, and also what I would do is when I was scoping out whatever project it was, right, I would take all of their quantitative data, because they loved quantitative data, and I would say, like, you know what, we don't know the whys of all these things. How much are we actually missing out on this, right? Like, I would kind of turn it into like that return on investment, right? It's like, okay, we had a success rate of this, 86% of blah, blah, blah. I wonder how much is that client actually missing out on because of, we didn't actually, do the user testing. So we don't actually know the whys of all these things. So when I would flip it around, and I would then make my little proposal as lean as possible, right? I would be like, I just need, 5 or 6 participants. I would try to make it, as guerrilla, as lean as possible, as quick as possible, with the least amount of people that I could grab from around me. And then later, when we actually implement it, that's when I would say, and also I would love to invite more people that were on retainer to join into the study or whatever, and be able to expand it out from there. But
there's a method of doing that too. It's like, Here's the really lean model, and by the way, here are the risks. And here's a slightly better model with less risks. And that also is a good way of selling along. But again, a lot of executives or clients, whatever, they're fear-based. And if you help them understand why you're doing it and what's at risk, it's an easy way to go. And the irony of you're telling them the why you want to do the why is not lost on me.
Yeah, I mean, I think risk, from a business perspective, it always gets their attention for sure. I think a lot of this is just operationalizing qualitative research, so you're not constantly having to climb uphill every time. And what we've done is we kind of think of qualitative in terms of like different work streams. So there's kind of ongoing, continuous discovery that never really ends, and so you have this undercurrent of qualitative and quantitative, but often qualitative-driven discovery activity. So the team is constantly being fed qualitative insights, and they're used to that, and there's a regular built into our resources. And there's kind of this like midstream, which is where we're kind of doing a lot of iterative and formative work in terms of, what problem you're trying to solve. Maybe there's design thinking that happens in that sort of swim current. And then kind of the fastest track is more like lean usability testing, where we could do smaller sample sizes, more validation. So I think if the teams get used to kind of using qualitative research almost at different speeds and different scopes, then it doesn't feel like there's such a friction there, and you're constantly trying to get it done. Yeah. And I'm not saying it takes a little while to get that off the ground, but when it does, it's a beautiful thing. So
That's good.
please, yeah.
If your organization doesn't want to do qualitative research, you can squeeze in a small study and basically say, let's see what we get. And it might be that with 5 or 6 people, it's conclusive. You see that here are the top issues that came out of it, and we see 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5 or whatever that might be. And if it's inconclusive, then you could say, well, we really need to do another round.
Them along with you when they do it. If they're not,
Yeah,
you bring them along with you, right?
yeah, of course.
I think. I'm sorry, sorry, who was that?
Yeah.
Again, I can't emphasize enough how much you have to bring people along, and you are. People who don't know, they weren't educated in it, or they had one course in it 9 years ago, and they think they remember, they don't want to admit they don't know. But you have to show the value of why you're doing it.
Exactly. And what you just said, one of our teammates actually did that a couple of weeks ago. What happened was they were asking something, and she knew that qualitative research is needed, but there was some resistance. And what she did was the stakeholder went on vacation, and when she came back, the research was done. Like in 1 week, she just did 5, exactly, like with 5 people, she just ran a study, and the stakeholder was so happy. And from then on, they were providing more requests and asking us to do more research. So that shows, if they come back to us, that shows success, right? So
Can I ask you two a question real quick? Do you have to explain to people why 5 is a valid enough small number?
Yeah. So I cite, the Nielsen curve and, and the other research, Verzi, other people who were doing the research in the early 90s and what they learned. Yeah.
I don't have an issue with 5, but I think 5 to me is an arbitrary number a bit. I think you have to, 5 of the right kind of users, though. I think it's really important, because if you keep saying 5, they get that trained in their brain. Sure. You can have, you might need 50 participants if it's such a, diverse sample, with all different backgrounds. So.
As a matter of fact, it's back in the day. Most of you probably weren't born, but Jared Spool wrote an article that got a lot of press. I think he presented it originally at CHI. And it was that you need 50 users, when you've got a website, like a shopping website, like an Amazon. But what I countered was, because I talked to Jared to find out how he actually did the study, is they just went outside their building and they just recruited people off the street, and they said, here's $50, go buy a gift for your mother. So they were all over the website. So the critical criteria for being able to do it with small numbers is that it has to be the same user group. They have to have the same tasks. They have to be going to the same place in the interface, because then you will have findings that overlap and you'll see consistency.
And by the way, hell on earth to me is when you do a quick of 5 and 2 like it and 2 don't.
Well,
or three, like, yeah, no, yeah, like, but that means hell. I'm like, now what do I do? So the grown-up answer is do more. But you're like, oh, we're done here. I'm like, no.
Exactly. And sometimes if the tool is not like definitely like it's showing some clear signs of it's not going to be successful, 5 is definitely no because you already reached saturation so early. But and sometimes like you don't even need to do that. You can just do heuristic evaluation. But I think it also matters who are the people, the participants. Like if they are, I don't know, like physicians or specific specialties, like the less number of participants we have access to, the time that they have to put. So all of those things really matter. But that's why that's the situations where we do some research, the rest of that we create personas, and then we do more research. Okay, so moving on to case studies in success. Can you share a notable case study where qualitative research played a crucial role in improving user experiences or achieving business objectives? Or something that you're proud of?
The problem is the speaker's face that we can't hear.
Oh, yeah. So any case study of success that,
Yeah, I can do it. We're talking about case studies of success, right? So, so that we did a study, the last study at my job, where we got to, it was for a healthcare company that had senior care centers, so like those primary care physician centers, and it was for some websites for them, you know, to see how a patient, like a new prospective patient, you know, could do, you know, find a doctor, find a location and whatnot on this website. And so they had this new, so on top of, it was the first time we did user testing on there, so they were excited to see, you know, what happened. But there was we had some assumptions because there was this new map, this interactive map, which everybody was so excited about, right? That was this new experience. It was going to be cool. Everyone was, you know, thinking, and that this was going to be the thing that they were going to replace the old location locator for. And, you know, I had tested, you know, I looked at it, you know, designers had it. I looked at it and I tested it on my mobile, on my tablet. Everything looked great to me. I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. Okay. So here I go. And I get 10 participants, 65 to 80 years old. You know, and boy, out of those participants, no, I lied, actually. It was just 5 because it wasn't the full that actually did that test. Out of the 5, 3 of them hated it. 1 of them grunted because I couldn't see his face because he was on a mobile test, and so we did that hug the laptop method where you see the thing. He grunted and in frustration. Another just really hated it, and 2 people actually were very polite and were very like, wow, we like this. But when you timed it between how fast they could actually find a location using this new map that everybody was so happy about, it took them so much longer to find it. And so I immediately took those findings, like we immediately when we were getting these findings, and I was kind of joking with the whole team as a whole, but we're talking about bringing people along with us, is I was actually when we were noticing, wow, like this map is doing horribly, right? We were like 0 out of 4 out of everybody likes it, right? So so I started putting in our little Teams meetings little blurbs about it, right? Little quotes already out there, you know. And this wasn't official, but it was just kind of bringing more people along that weren't coming with us to kind of be like, wow, this is what we're noticing. And so that was kind of an interesting thing to kind of then show at the end to the client, like this thing that, you know, we all designed, that we thought we had a huge surprise on this. And so that kind of really helped things along as far as, you know, advocating for more qualitative research, more user research, right? Talking to the users themselves, because we are obviously not the user, especially when we're talking about the senior population. We were not the user at the time, right?
I'm working with a client on an app that is likely to go enterprise. And we're currently looking at alpha. And the decision was made to do a diary study. And there were 13 people who ended up agreeing to participate in the diary study. And 4 of them completed it over a 3-week period. So I'm a member of the UX team. So I said, I want to interview the people who dropped out. We know what happened to the people who finished it, and they were pretty high on it, and they had some things to say, that were constructive criticism. But what about the 9 people who dropped out? So I was able to follow up and ask you, we noticed you were interested in, doing this 3-week study, and you dropped out before you completed it. And would you give me a 15-minute IDI, an in-depth interview, 15 minutes to just sort of pick your brain and get your insights about why you dropped out. Not all of them agreed to do it, obviously, but I was able to interview 5 of them, and that was really insightful. So between the 5 that I interviewed and the 4 that finished the 3-week diary study, we only had information from very, very few people, but the question that the client asked was, is it good enough to go to beta? Just on the basis of those few people that we did qualitative research and the answer was no. That you have to do some very significant things, very consistent things that came up from those who finished it and those who did not finish it if you're going to go to beta. And the company was very receptive to that, and they're working on those things before they go to beta.
You just made me think of something. One of the biggest selling points I find for qualitative research is anybody here work with really detailed user telemetry data? In mobile apps or games and some healthcare apps, we'll get really detailed telemetry where we're tracking the mouse, we're tracking everything going on. And a lot of companies will confuse, well, I know what's going on. I'm like, you know what's going on, you have no idea why it's going on. And that data with qualitative research, especially on the people who fail, that's where you find out what's going on. The people who fail or quit or get angry with the telemetry data, that's the gold.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want to go back to the website if it's they're not going to explore. So
We're doing questions in the end. Why did those 5 not continue? Why did they not continue? They didn't continue for the same reasons that the others who did continue did it, because they were loyal and they wanted to get through it, but they had the same issues, which surfaced in the first week. Yeah.
awesome. Finally, let's discuss building a strong case. What key elements do you include in a business case for qualitative research to ensure alignment with organizational goals, while also advocating for users?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the point. I think is that we're all in a professional environment, not academia, so we're not doing the research just to learn and educate people. So a lot of this really understands really what the organization is trying to achieve, and what I mean by that is it can be something as tactical as we're launching a new app, we have to test it, we want to know what users think. A lot of the work I've done is way earlier, or actually earlier, but also looking to the future. So how do you actually do really strong qualitative research that builds a foundation to build kind of a North Star vision and future state stuff? And so that's very hard, because a lot of organizations are very top down. You have executives who think they know the customer, they know everything. So a lot of that is sort of building this infrastructure where qualitative research can be scoped incrementally. So we're kind of building towards this future state. And I literally, in my organization, I have a big graphic of a bridge, literally. And it's like, we want to end up at the far side of the bridge, which is this magical future state. We're currently on the other side of the bridge. Literally, how is research going to inform each part of that bridge building process? How are we building the pylons along the way? And so what I do is we basically have research milestones. Okay, here's where we start our research. Based on what we've learned here, how do we take those learnings and actually apply that to the next stage? And a lot of that is kind of gating the research and basically saying, okay, we've made it from here to here in maybe the first year. How has the research informed that? How has it validated that? And then how is it helping us then kind of predict what's coming to the next phase? And so what we do is we work with the executives to sort of figure out, what do they need to learn in order to get to that next pillar to build the bridge? And then how do we make sure there's enough rigor of quantitative and qualitative research to actually build that next part of the bridge? And so we found if we break it apart, It's not so mysterious to get to kind of this future state. We're actually helping them do that incrementally over time. And a lot of that is really, again, working with kind of executive stakeholders to speak kind of their language, but also kind of helping them understand kind of why the research actually can inform their strategy. I would say, and this is probably the biggest thing I've been finding lately, is that research and strategy are almost the same thing in many ways. You really can't, you shouldn't be doing strategy without having data to inform what that is, ideally. and so that's really, I think, where our field is going, especially in user research, is we're really research strategists at the end of the day. So like I said, so the business goals are really driving this, but we're really building this future state with those stakeholders.
So probably good in my commercial selloutness or being whatever you want to call me. There's an awful word, a couple awful words that come to mind. But if you want to get executives' attention, you talk about recurring sales or retaining users. And if you want to retain users, you have to have relationships. And qualitative research is the only way to get what the emotions are with those relationships. And so the way I don't deal with your problems to not have your problem is a guy named Carl Steiner, who was one of my first heads of research, and Carl's been around. He's a great researcher, and he's run some great research. After each panel or each session, he would give me a one-pager. And Carl's one-pager is brilliant, and I've had fights, and I've helped some other people find new careers because they wouldn't do the one-pager. It's not that you don't want the detail behind it, but Carl's one-pagers were brilliant. 4-sentence summary of what's going on and the emotions he unearthed. Highlights, lowlights, and other things you need to know. And they were designed for me and my bosses, mostly for me to give my bosses. What was so powerful about those is inherently, once a week, I'd hear something in that report being said by an executive. He's like, oh, well, did you know our clients really love chocolate? When they have chocolate, it makes them feel really mighty. Right? But the point is, if you're giving them something, you're creating a value loop with your executive teams, and that's how you get rid of this problem. But if you put it in terms of recurring revenue, user retention, user conversion, user acquisition, and lowering those costs of user acquisition, and developing relationships, and extracting what qualitative research is so good at, but summarize it, make it simple, feed it to them in little bites that they can swallow and understand. That's how you get rid of the problem.
So one thing I was doing is, of course I was trying to speak their language, right? Everybody else's language, and using like PowerPoint. I had to get really good at PowerPoint presentations, those little five slide PowerPoint presentations to do like my little spiel, my proposals, whatever it was, the results. But also I got really, really good at getting to know every single gosh darn person that I worked with, right? I became best friends with SEO, best friends with strategy, best friends with the dev people, best friends with everybody, because, a lot of my work, once they saw what I was doing and how it was helping them out in their reports, because they were able to then have more confidence in their recommendations to the client, right? Dev was able to pull me in on other projects. Once I really got in there to like everybody else and their mom on the teams, they were talking about me behind my back, and all the other meetings, like we should pull this in because we need more of this, and that was so my recommendation really is coffee chat every single person on the team, find out what they need, find out what they're working on. I was right before I was let go, I was coffee chatting up many of the data analysts, for example, because a lot of times they were finding out some interesting quantitative things, right, about what was going on projects that I was not involved in. I was like, if you see something, any little thing, let me know. If there's something curious that you're interested in, like I can figure out the why. And so really, get to know everybody, get to know them on a personal level, because then when you do want to get on a project that you hear about, or if you're an agency, or if you want to do more, you can have them be your advocates for you. So if I'm in a meeting and I'm saying, you know what, I really believe in this, we should do this type of study, we should do it in this way, and we need to expand the timeline out. Now I got Jenny over here, who's like now my best friend, also being like, yes, I agree with her. I'm SEO, and yeah, absolutely. So I think definitely, making those best friends and getting to them on a personal level, so then they advocate for you while you're advocating for yourself, is amazing.
Such a great point, and relationships really matter and collaboration really matter. In fact, I was in the talk about career ladder right before, like I think at 1 today, and they shared about, as user experience researchers, we collaborate with many different groups of, from product team to project management to design to like different teams that we are collaborating with. So being able to communicate with them and connect with them is very important. Great, awesome. So now we can open the floor for questions and discussions, and please feel free to ask any questions.
All right, thank you for the talk. It's very interesting. So at my org, I have almost the opposite problem where everyone understands the value of qualitative research, but the issue is they think, right, I just talked to someone, focus group, that you don't have to have researcher training, that's already qualitative insight. So then the questions I often get is like, why does it take you so long to like analyze the data? And like, why do you need to be so stringent? And sometimes what we see is that, the insights from our team is different from, them broadly talking to others. So my question is, how do you, improve the literacy of what is a valid qualitative study? Or if your answer is pick your battle, I don't know. So how do you do that? And also like make sure that the understanding of research in the organization increases as a whole?
I'm just going to have a 30-second answer and then pass it to somebody else who I'm sure can answer this better. So when I had this, is I had the clients, after we finished, after we finished a study, they're so excited about it because I've pumped them up about it, that all of a sudden they wanted the answers right away, and so what I would do is I would just give them like a smaller, like, here's some initial findings, like here's I'm going to give you a little presentation about this. It's the initial find, and making sure that I was very much, this is the initial. We still have to synthesize. We still have to analyze. We are still in the midst of all of these things, but like, let me give you a little tidbit. Cause yeah, they got very, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. They were so excited about wanting the information, but they thought that we could just do it right the day after we finished interviews. So.
The other thing on a different angle, there was a killer talk this morning on bias. Educate them on bias. I'm a pain in the ass because I do not let my researchers do design. I don't let my designers do research. I want church and state. Now I want them fighting together, but I want church and state. You have to educate that, and especially when you get smart people who think they understand it, they can do it all. And so I said, well, you saw a course on ER. You can do surgery now.
I always try to do a stand-up stakeholders meeting at the end of a study, if you have any observers, remote or in person, because you do want to capture the excitement. And you can roll that up pretty easily without it having to be scientific, because you know what you saw. And you even can get a sense as you're going through it, what might be some possible solutions to explore. So I think you can give them something right away. And that may be what they're looking for. Well, and for some, because I'm a consultant, so for some of my clients, when I'm actually, pricing the job, I say, what do you want for the deliverable? Maybe all you want is the stand-up meeting.
And what do you need?
Yeah, and what do you need? What are you going to do with it? Do you have to have a repository where you're documenting, which of course a lot of companies do, they have to document it and so forth. But if you are the people in the room who are going to go away with this and you're ready to do it, after the 2 days of research or whatever it is that you've done, the 5, the 7, the 10 people, then just give them what they want. And it could be the 1-pager, for example, that comes the next day. It could be the 5 slides in the deck. With a couple of participant quotes and maybe a video clip, but it doesn't have to be what my friend Steve Krug calls the big honkin' report. It doesn't have to be that every time. So you want to find out what the expectations are, what they're going to do with it, and then how to deliver quickly, even, on the short term.
I'll give you. Do you know what's even more valuable than the 1-pager is the Outlook preview. Best advice I ever got was in my 30s. My boss said, if it's important, make sure I can see it in the Outlook preview, the first 4 lines on my mobile phone. I can't tell you how valuable that is for smart executives who are little knowledge is a dangerous tool, but give them the nugget to hook them in and say, more's coming tomorrow or more's coming on Friday.
I'll actually sort of contradict. I mean, I think that, I agree with the reason behind it. And I think, yes, waiting 3 months for a 100-slide PowerPoint is a waste of everyone's time. I agree with that. So, I think qualitative research has to be done faster so we can get the people the results they need so that way they can start acting on it. However, I've worked with too many product teams that they have this go mentality that if you give them just a little bit of nuggets, they're going to run with that. And they're going to make all of the decisions on that one little nugget though. They don't really care if you'll say, oh, well, there's going to be more in the big report. They will have acted everything.
You raise an interesting point.
Yeah.
You have to know
Yeah.
some clients take messy and some can't. And to your point,
Yeah.
if you have a researcher who's afraid to get messy, they're waiting for perfect, you outdate yourself.
True. Yeah.
You gotta find that it's tension. Tension's not always bad.
Yeah, I think you just have to be aware, because especially if you're dealing with qualitative research, or maybe you give a quote from one participant and you haven't finished analyzing the rest of them, see if that quote is truly representative. They're going to run with that, especially product teams that move very quickly in an agile cycle. Any little nugget you give, you have to be careful because they may just run with that. And that may not be representative of the research you're trying to represent. And so I'd say just be I think concise, relatively quick research, but complete and contextual is still important though. So.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to add on to kind of what y'all were saying in her question though, that inside of an org, I think it's still an education problem. Even if it's stakeholder, they may not know what they're asking for, even though they support it.
The worst thing that's happened in user research is human-centered design. The worst thing that's happened in user research is human-centered design and design thinking, which I call design theater, because they took a course online and now they know everything they need to know. Your job is to educate them that was a great preview. Here's why the details matter to you, right? But again, great lesson is you have to educate your client if you want to keep them from doing harm to you as well as themselves.
Also
Yeah, but
prioritize.
I was just going to add one quick thing to Andrew to counter that. If they're going to run with it, it's better for them to run with something than nothing. So if you're in a really rapid cycle, I would argue for giving them what you've got with, and disclaimers and letting them run with it, because by the time you give them the report, they've already left.
And there's nothing like a sharp wound to teach you respect. Oh, come on, you all thought it. You all thought it. I mean, I personally would never give them the wrong piece of information just to teach them a point. I mean, I know a guy who might, but I would never do that.
Also, sometimes it's okay to say no
Right.
to such projects or such stakeholders. But sometimes it's also okay to say no to other stakeholders at the time and prioritize if that's an important project and put most of the time to deliver in the time frame that they're expecting. Yeah.
I had a question. Again, piggybacking off of her question and something you said that struck me, the separation of church and state, right? In order to combat those, really short timelines and everything else, there's been a lot of push for democratization and opening it up for product managers and designers to do their own research. Any successful strategies to argue against it with all and you may disagree with this point, that it may not be as, negative or dangerous, so to speak, but any tips and tricks to argue against that?
I wrote a guest editorial a couple of years ago in the UXPA journal on the democratization of user research and all of the pitfalls. I think it's a huge problem. And the reason I think it's a huge problem is for the platforms. user testing has now gobbled just about everybody up, but there used to be a number of them. There's still a few left, and there's some new ones coming on. But particularly in large organizations, because the platforms in the beginning you could use them for free if you had only X number of participants in the study, and then you could pay monthly. But now it's all gone enterprise by and large, and so it's the big companies, and they're using the platforms to, they pay for them, they're very expensive, and they're using the platforms to get the answers to the research, which is fine if the person who's setting up the study knows what they are doing. And that's my concern about the democratization of research, so that you can bring anybody in there, they can just put it on the platform, and we'll get an answer.
I worked in a design studio years ago, a corporate design studio, and they did something very smart. They knew they would get overwhelmed at times. So they had an approved vendor list. But to become an approved vendor, they had to come and spend time with my bosses and get educated. When you work with our teams, these are the rules. And these are the terms we use, these are the terms we don't. So we had this one team, we didn't do user research, we did user validation. Right? And so whatever the terms are, so you create your short list of vendors who you can trust, and these are the house rules. And so if you get busy, if you want to go democracy, here's something more republic than democracy. But there's some in between steps, but you can control it and make sure it's philosophically aligned with the kind of UI you need to do.
We have time for one more question.
Let me give just a 30-second answer to this to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Right before I was laid off, I was starting to advocate a little bit more for a little bit of democratization of the research, but in a way of, we had 30 clients, and I was the only person that was kind of able to do the research side of it. We had another UX designer, but she was design, and so I was starting to teach the other designers how to kind of guerrilla test just their prototypes and their websites and landing pages and all the things. But I would teach them how to do that, right, with like their husbands, their whatever, but very, very simple things, right? It wasn't a full-on UX study, but that was the only way I was letting them kind of do that, is kind of teaching them how to ask task in a certain way. But like that was the only way that I could see as like people that didn't have a research background able to do that.
I gotta add one 20-second comment. Steve Krug and I have an ongoing argument for years. In his book, Don't Make Me Think, and also Rocket Surgery Made Easy, he says, just grab Joe down the hall, just get your neighbor. And I absolutely 100% disagree with that.
I would go with Christina more. I mean, also, I think we have, I think that, realistically, there are never enough researchers to go around. So how many of you, just show up hands, how many of you have all the research capacity you need? You don't need any more research. Okay, so just checking. So that's the reality. So research cannot always be done by researchers. Maybe that's blasphemy to say, but I think properly supervised research in certain situations does work. And I think, there has to be a level of quality control and oversight, but we've had a lot of luck with product managers, designers, business analysts, who have been able to assist and augment our research capacity with our oversight by our research team. And that's worked really well. And actually, it's a really good strategy, not just to increase your research capacity, but it also gets those people you want to be looped into research. You want them as to buy in, and so it serves multiple purposes if done properly.
For another 20 seconds, because it's what we do.
We're not going to have more questions.
But there's be at half speed. Sorry. There's a really cool technique the guys that made Halo, the original Halo, do, and they call play testing. And it's not user research, but boy, is it powerful. It's a great way to democratize the load. So every day at 5 o'clock, the entire studio of 200 people stops working, and they play the build of the day as a team. And they're banging on that build as a team. And then the design team goes behind it and figures out, they observe, and they, okay, what are we not happy with, we've happy with? And then from there, user research takes the higher problems. And that was and I've actually been doing that a lot in my studios since. So there's UR and there's play testing, and they're different. But for tuning and feel, UR is not great at that, but play testing where people are living it and breathing it, and then you can, and then we'll have some really cool teams. They'll bring people into play test with the team, and that's sobering and fun. So that's another way of dealing with that. There's a medical term called top of license, where the doctors want to tell you to stop eating French fries. They want to do the cool stuff. So that's a way for me letting the UR people be top of license, is do things like play testing. But if you do it, build into the culture. So it's daily. So we'll start play testing on the first the first flow chart sometimes. And we'll put a paper up top on a wall, make the intern play on the wall, and we'll watch. But there's 100 ways you can do that to build it into that culture where every day is play testing from the first concept through till final. And so the UR is working top of license.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much for our amazing panelists for their participation and answering many questions. If you have more questions, feel free to ask. I don't know. Feel free to.
We have the reception at 6 p.m. I can imagine most of us will be at the reception, so happy to engage in the conversation further then. And hang out here too, yeah.
Yeah, and you can find us later on during the conference as well. Awesome. Great.
Thank you.
Let's keep pushing forward for advocating for qualitative research.